Are you okay? Where's our friend? I left him down here with you.
Director Milan Todorovic brings us Killer Mermaid, aka MAMULA, aka Killer Mermaids, aka Nymph, along with a bunch of other titles from different countries. So this is the 2014, Killer Mermaid movie, and the story features two young American women who go on holiday in the Mediterranean. They meet up with three locals and they all decide to go on a boating trip to this island which has kind of got this 19th century fort in it. However, there seems to be a serial killer who is killing people and feeding the remains to a mermaid which habitats the kind of the caves underneath this fort, and they kind of work in a unison, so to speak. And they're kind of now trapped on this island with this mermaid in the water and this killer on the land. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. This movie's notable star here is Franco Nero, although it is a supporting role rather than a kind of a main character. So let's talk about it. What works in this movie's favour? Now, I have to say, this one benefits from being kind of a lot of location shooting and some very kind of like picturesque scenery, and we get in a bit of underwater photography as well, which is done to a good standard. So I actually think the movie benefits from having this lovely kind of Mediterranean kind of feel to it, which really adds to that sort of that mermaid feel, I guess you want to say. So I think the technical elements here are pretty strong. There's a little bit of dodgy editing here and there. It's a minor issue, but for the most part, I think the movie's put together. For the most part, with the day sequences, it looks very kind of lush and beautiful. And then we have these kind of like when it gets dark, and we have these scenes in this kind of that hallway to this fort. It looks pretty menacing. So I think on a technical level, it's pretty strong in regards to that. It looks sumptuous. The mermaid creature itself, I think, is, pretty interesting. Now, we don't see loads of it. In actual fact, I would say for the majority of the screen time, the main threat here isn't the mermaid, it's this killer. But when we do see the mermaid, it's not one of these ones which transforms into, like, all human, but she's always got, like, the fish kind of lower half of her body, but she can transform into a kind of a more monstrous kind of top half, so to speak, or the kind of like the beautiful woman, to lure men in. And it's kind of a mix of practical VFX and then when she's kind of changing, and sometimes the tail is CGI. And I've got to say, the practical side of stuff, although it's clearly a little bit lower budget, I do think for the most part I think it works. And I like that the way this mermaid, when she is on land, she's just pulling herself along, with it, because she doesn't grow legs, which I thought was, again, you've seen that a few times in sometimes lower budget kind of like mermaid movies. This one, she's always got that kind of that fish kind of lower half of her body, and she does she doesn't like speak. Whenever she vocalizes, it's more singing, and that kind of affects the men only rather than the kind of the women, which makes her have this power over male victims and makes them pretty useless, to be honest. Which gives an interesting kind of threat dynamic, and you again couple that with this kind of killer who's sort of serving her, and these guys now can't get off this island, which is pretty unforgiving. It's all kind of like a rocky outcropping. So we do feel that our protagonists are in legitimate kind of danger. This killer kind of destroys their boat, so they're kind of pretty much trapped there. There's no other one on the island, so they're in a predicament, which I think gives the movie some stakes, which I kind of quite liked, I have to say. Franco Nero is great when he's on screen, I have to say, and there's actually a kind of couple of funny lines in the movie, one of which involving Franco Nero, where in the beginning of the movie, one of the kind of the American women sort of sees him, and says literally, "Oh look, I know what you did last summer," and because he's there as like this kind of salty old fisherman. And I just thought it was a great line with a little bit of a kind of a nod, obviously, to previous kind of horror films. I just thought that was quite fun. And there was a couple of kind of like lines here that I thought could have quite well written and stuff. So that was all kind of quite fun. All the women here are like, you know, very attractive, and a lot of them are in like skimpy costumes or sometimes topless or bikinis at the very least. There's plenty of eye candy if beautiful women are your thing. And obviously, I guess a mermaid movie you'd probably expect that, but even the non-mermaids, you know, they're all in their bikinis a lot of the time. There is a reasonable amount of you know, tension in this movie where, for the most part, once we get to the island and they realise that there's danger there, they are running around trying to get out from this the clutches of this killer, which gives it some kind of, you know, some reasonable kind of tension. And there's a couple of kind of gore shots here, mainly from the as I say, this killer rather than the mermaid. But he's pretty brutal, and he's beheading people and using this like anchor to kind of like reel people in and stuff. So there's a couple of reasonably brutal kills and okay kind of sort of gore shots in a practical sense here. So you know, it's all pretty good. And they save the mermaid for looking at the last act of the film, and she represents obviously the more supernatural challenge and stuff, and you know, it makes for a, you know, I have to say, a somewhat engaging film for the most part. What doesn't work in this movie, a few technical elements. As I said, there's a little bit of ropey editing, and as I've mentioned, I think sometimes the CGI, when this creature, the mermaid, transitions to her more beautiful human upper torso to the kind of the more monstrous one, they use kind of like a CGI to kind of like morph it, and it doesn't look good. And then, as I say, it's very noticeable CGI on the kind of like the tail when it's thrashing around, particularly out of water and stuff. So there's, you know, the CGI isn't great. Thankfully, I would say we see the mermaid more in a practical sense than CGI, but you know, there it is. I think the biggest issue here is possibly the acting. The majority of the cast here, I think, are actually Serbian, and they're speaking in English, and obviously it's not their native language. And I think sometimes because of that, the kind of the performances are a little stilted, particularly from, as I say, the non-American actors. But even some of the, you know, just generally speaking, the acting it's mixed, I would say. But there are a couple of clunker line deliveries here and there, particularly from this one guy called Alex, who's like the sort of, I guess one of the kind of the male characters. Yeah, so the acting isn't brilliant. I also have to say, you might be a little bit disappointed that there's not more mermaid here. And as I say, the majority of the threat, or at least if you look at screen time, I would say actually comes from this serial killer guy. And as brutal as he is, and he is connected to the mermaid, you're probably watching this more for mermaid action. And I think maybe the movie uses it a little too sparsely. Effective maybe when it's used, but maybe used a little too sort of sparsely. I mean, there's like there are opportunities here to have this kind of like, you know, creature attacking people when she's in the water and like grabbing people if they're swimming or in a boat or something like that, and you never really feel that that's kind of taken advantage of. So it doesn't necessarily feel like an aquatic horror because there's little action actually in the water. You get a little bit towards the end, but not a huge amount. I've got to say, so some of the way our main protagonist is one of the American women, and I have to say there's scenes here where this character is like hesitating a lot, or she does things like would be unwise to do in this situation. Just for an example, when they're running around from this killer, I mean, there's one instance where, well, there's more than one, where they're kind of like rooting around trying to do something, but like no one is like on the lookout. Like you would think there's a group of people, you know that there's a killer, you know, two of you go rooting around trying finding a way out whilst one of you is looking out for this guy. They don't do that. We have a sequence where we have two of the women just sat there watching the one of our kind of male protagonists fighting this serial killer, I'm thinking, surely, you know, it's kind of like a stalemate. You've got, there's two of you there. Surely you can, like, bash this guy over the head with a rock or punch him or something to give your friend an advantage. And then we have another situation towards the end, which, again, hesitation causes a problem, certainly for one of the characters. I'm thinking, this makes this particular character, you know, her inaction, I have to say, a little bit frustrating, and ultimately, you know, you've caused other people some issues, which I think, to me, in my mind at least, makes this character a little unsympathetic when she is meant to be the main character, the main protagonist, and we are meant to root for her, but her inaction is the root of a lot of the issues here. That kind of, I found it a little bit irritating, to be honest. So it's an okay movie, ultimately, though. It's worth a watch if you're a creature feature fan. Maybe less creature in this than maybe some would like, but when it is there, it's okay. Probably one of the better mermaid films, but there's not that many, I suppose. But yeah, it's probably about an average horror film. It's okay. It's nothing special. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. If you didn't, what did you think? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to you next time.